Welcome back for another edition of The Final Mile, where we answer your questions from emails, from YouTube comments, Facebook group, etc. Don't be deceived by the title of the video if you're watching on YouTube, or the title of the episode on podcast. We're going to be answering 5 questions today, so the title might not reflect all of them, but we're going to be talking about team settings in freight brokerage, USDA inspections versus non-produce or fresh food claims, filing on a bond, that process, having a website as a freight brokerage, and also blind shipments. So make sure you stay tuned for all 5 of those. They're also listed in the description or episode show notes. So please be patient as we will get to all of the questions. Make sure to check out all of our other content at freight360.net, including the Freight Broker Basics course for everything you need to know from how to start your brokerage and launch it successfully and go the distance. And please, to support this channel, check out the sponsors in the description box or show notes. All right, Ben, our first question, as I alluded to before, is about team settings. So the listener asked, could a team setting in freight brokering work? Why or why not? For example, I would have my wife work with clients who are bilingual or prefer to speak in another language. So basically, you don't have to be a solo freight broker with your own company to answer the question up front. And most freight brokerages that succeed are not just one person. It can be, but they'll oftentimes grow out. It could be a small group. Maybe there's 5 to 10 people, but a lot of the big brokers out there have hundreds, if not thousands or more people, all in the same organization. And there's different ways to go about doing this. So for this guy's question, he said, my wife would work with some clients and I'd work with others. That's absolutely legitimate and reasonable. A lot of the successful brokerages will break out different maybe regions or different commodities, equipment types. You might have someone that's a team that specializes in refrigerated or in produce, while someone else handles open deck like steel, lumber, brick, stone, etc. You could even break out your brokerage in teams where you might have a pod where you've got a team lead, and then you've got some account managers, and then you've got some operations folks that assist, and they keep all of their business in one little pod. There's a whole lot of ways to do it. There's no prescribed right or wrong way to do it. So by all means, the team setting can work. It's a preference thing. And if you want to go that route, some people break up sales and operations, like we mentioned, and others say, no, we just have a bunch of brokers and they're all cradle to grave, meaning they all get their own customers, they manage those customers, and they book trucks for those customers. What else would you add in here?
I would add, you pretty much covered most of it. The only thing I would add is when you're sharing or splitting responsibilities, I would say, meaning, let's just say in the traditional example is one person is covering loads, the other person is dealing with the customers. Is most of them will split, kind of the responsibilities that way. But what I would recommend anybody that is currently set up that way or thinking about it is to take time learning the other person's role. Meaning, if you are going to be dealing with the customer side, you absolutely should be spending time every week booking trucks, dispatching them, doing check calls, and learning that side of the business, because that's the part that's going to make you far more effective at talking to customers. And that's the thing that I think lots of companies overlook when they separate them and then they don't really talk to each other, because then you only have sales reps that only know what about the market they hear from that person as opposed to the actual market. And I think anytime you can spend on the other side makes you better at your job, and vice versa, right? If you're on the carrier side, understanding the sales side and what the customers are expecting, why, and what's important to them makes you far more better to deal with carriers and to be bringing the right relationships for the right customers.
And I'll add in one last thing. If you're a W-2 at a company where you're in sales or operations, learn some of the other back office administrative functions, even just a baseline understanding, because the accounting and credit side, for example, understand what goes into approving a credit line, or what goes into the claims process so you can help explain this to your customer. What goes into the carrier compliance if you have to tell a carrier no, understand why that is, and so you can better prepare yourself to find better quality carriers. So, but good question. Next up, if USDA inspections are used with produce claims, what happens if industrial goods or auto parts, or if it's industrial goods or auto parts involved and the receiver refuses to accept it due to an accident and rejects everything. So I'll generalize this. We had a recent discussion about produce and USDA inspections, but this question seems to ask, what about every other commodity where the USDA wouldn't be involved? What does that look like if there's a claim, or and we'll answer afterward. What if the receiver rejects it? So if there's just a claim on it, if the receiver accepts it and it's not a clean bill of lading, there's damage or there's a shortage or something like that, the claims process still carries out. You just don't have a USDA inspection involved, which, again, that's not even a requirement to have USDA inspection. It just helps out with identifying a third party to give the condition of that fresh food or produce to assist in the claim. But you'd have annotations on the bill of lading that here's what's damaged, here's what's missing. You take pictures. That all goes into that claims presentation to the insurance company, so the adjuster has all the information, and it avoids that back and forth he said she said. Now, what if the customer or the receiver refuses or rejects everything? What do you do? Well, there's no law here. And Ben, I'm curious what your experience in this is, but it's oftentimes very hectic because brokers receiver won't take it. They got to call their shipper and be like, hey, they're not accepting this. What do you want me to do? And the shipper might be like, well, what's wrong with it? It can't come back here. Right. So it comes down to you have to figure out the best possible solution because nobody wants to take fault for it. The driver's going to say, it wasn't my fault. Shipper's going to say, it wasn't my fault. And the receiver is going to say, it's definitely not my fault because I just got it. So there's oftentimes a lot of back and forth, and communication is key here because your driver is you guys are wasting my time because
Yep.
I'm on duty right now and I have another load I have to pick up tomorrow morning. So you want to go into it, I guess empathetic might be the best way, but put yourself in every party's shoes and do your best job as an intermediary, which we are as freight brokers, to try and work out a solution. And then ensure that everybody knows we're going to make everybody whole here through this claims process.
Yeah.
What's your take? Have you ever had that happen where the receiver's like, I ain't taking it?
Yeah. Here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to take the frustration from the party, maybe the receiver in this instance, and then you get frustrated and then you start yelling at your shipper, right? Or the driver,
your carrier,
or whoever, right? First is you listen and then just try to get the information is the first step. What actually occurred, right? And again, what happened is likely going to determine what you do next, right? I mean, was it likely there was an accident, right, loading it, and the driver was like, hey, it seemed like the forklift or the guy putting it in there had some issues? Was it something that happened in transit? Because again, that's going to determine what your likely next course of action is. If it's at the receiver and it might have been damaged at loading, well, you're going to have a conversation with the shipper as to what you think happened. They're likely going to go talk to their dock worker to verify it, and maybe you can take it back, right? Now, if it happened over the road, right, you're going to file a traditional claim. And again, you might have to figure out what salvage value is and where that's going to go from there. And that, however that plays out, it's going to play out. And there's just kind of no way to know until you start working through the details. But I've had scenarios where this was a really odd one. I've talked about this on air where I was shipping a bunch of steel from overseas, from the port of New Orleans to the steel mills up around the Great Lakes. And they passed that tariff in 17 or 18 on steel, 25% on imported steel. But it wasn't outlined as to at which point in time that tariff and who paid it. So the receivers refused to pay it. The shipper in Brazil refused to pay it. And then the receivers refused to take it because they thought maybe they would be accepting responsibility for the tariff. So they just said, the next 15 trucks, we just can't deliver them. So we had to find individual warehousing for every single one of these loads, transload them into a warehouse until they worked through who was going to pay the tariff, and then had to pay the transportation costs to get it delivered there. This took months to be able to resolve even just the billing
I imagine
aspect.
the receiver ended up having to absorb at least a chunk, if not all of that, based on it was an import tariff, right? Or do you remember by chance?
Now, I don't recall how it actually played out. I do remember
That's a unique one too.
I remember it taking months. And again, we were having to deal with loads like long, I mean, literally like 3 and 4 months later, they were still in storage because they were still working through like the semantics
Yeah.
of how it was going to go. So again, I only use that because as an example, it really depends on what happens. And then you really just want to go to the next party and try to work towards an amicable solution for everybody,
Yep.
right? Hey, sometimes there's salvage value. Sometimes maybe the receiver's like, well, hey, look, I've got some room in my warehouse. We can leave it here until you resolve it. And again, you're probably going to have to work out some type of creative solution in some of these scenarios. And again, you just got to talk to everybody, listen more than you direct, and try to work to find a happy medium for everybody.
Definitely. Good example there. Next up, what happens if a claim is filed on your bond and you can't pay the amount of money that is owed? So freight brokers carry either a freight broker surety bond or they've got a freight broker trust. And while so here we'll answer the question first. If a carrier files on a freight broker's bond, the bond company doesn't just automatically pay out the claim. They're going to do a little bit of a gathering of information, right? Because it could be a he said, she said, which it usually is. But if it's something like um, carrier was promised X amount of money for this, the broker deducts money because they had verbiage that stated, if you're late, you lose $200, and the carrier says, I'm going to file on your bond for the short payment. The bond company, if they collect all the information and find out that the carrier doesn't deserve that money, they're gonna reject the claim. If the bond company does their due diligence, they does the research and finds out freight broker does owe this money, the money will get issued out. I've even seen the times where the bond company's like, hey, you're going to lose this, just pay it, right? But if you can't pay it because you don't have the money, then in this scenario, the bond would pay that money out. Now, a bond, it is an insurance product, but it's not an insurance policy that just states, "Oh, we'll pay out up to the 75K and there's no recourse." No, if you lose and if a bond pays out, you're responsible to pay that money back, which is why at all costs you should avoid the bond company being involved if you know you owe that money to the motor carrier. Where we tend to see bonds get filed on more so is if a broker is going out of business and they don't have the cash to pay their carriers their line haul payments, the bond company will get chewed up pretty quick, pay out all that money, and the brokerage will close their doors. But yeah, I mean, if that bond company pays out, it is the broker's responsibility to reimburse that bond. It's the same thing with like a bail bondsman or what's the pawn, like a pawn shop, right?
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Good stuff. Next question. Do you need to have a website developed in order to start a freight brokerage? No. And I know we had a video about how to market your freight brokerage. And one of the things we talked about was an online presence. You don't need a website to get started. The whole analysis paralysis idea where people will overthink and overcomplicate what they have to do, which then results in them not doing anything.
Yep.
Don't be thinking I need to have this website all shiny and ready to roll. And until that's ready, I can't make phone calls. No. But as you grow and you're going to be prospecting people, some sort of professional image is going to help you beyond just regular relationship skills. So having something like a good LinkedIn page, a professional LinkedIn page for yourself or for your freight brokerage company. And sure, down the road, a website if you want to go that route, but it's not really necessary. I feel like a website is more of just it's an online image of yourself. You're not going to get leads coming through there typically. What do you think?
I think I'm going to start with the last point. Building a website is not going to get you business, but I do think it's important, to your point, for image, because here's where I think it matters, right? And again, if you're new, I wouldn't spend the money on it yet, but a LinkedIn business profile I would absolutely do, and you should have it as the employee of the brokerage. Because when you're prospecting and you're calling companies and emailing them, the first thing they're going to do before they're ever going to give you a load or work with you is to look to see if you are who you are. So they're likely to going to go to LinkedIn. And the second place they're usually going to look is to see if you have a website, right? And again, you can now get a website. You could build one on WordPress. Like my mind's blanking. Like the
Templates.
website, yeah, the templates to build them are super easy now. Like you could basically drag and drop it, add some text, look at a couple other examples. You should be able to get one up for less than $100 and probably $20 a month to service it. Look at some other examples of other smaller brokerages. And to be honest, most of them look the same for this very reason, right?
Yeah.
They're stock templates. There's a couple of pictures of a truck. But the important piece is that your relevant info is on there, right? Like your company name, your address, your contact info, so that when a shipper that you've reached out to looks to verify you, they can see, oh, like this is a legitimate business. I'm at least know that I'm talking to the person that works at the company I'm talking to, right?
Yeah. And I'll
That's what I
say,
think the value is.
I want to add this in too. As you grow your company and you're looking to hire people, that's when
Yes.
also a website will become a good tool, because if you think about it, if you've ever applied for a job, you probably checked them out on their website to see if it looks
Mm-hmm.
legit. And I do want to throw this in here. We've had Trey Griggs on like almost 10 times, if not 10 times, like
Yes.
exactly. That's one of the things that his company is doing now with Beta Consulting Group, is helping companies find whatever their message and their vision is and put it to words and help share that on their website and through other testimonial type things. And I think it's definitely helpful as your brokerage grows as far as long-term relationships with big customers that might vet you out, but also for hiring and getting the right talent. And they can see that, oh, this is a legitimate company, not some guy with a Gmail account and a Facebook profile of him hitting a beer bong in his college years. So
Well, speaking of just funny things, like this blue balloon just bounced in to the office right behind you as you're saying
oh, it's
that.
probably for my kids. They like to play quote unquote volleyball with
Yeah.
balloons. It's funny. I got a fan in the corner because it's kind of warm in here today. It's like in the 60s in Buffalo. But anyway, that's funny. All right, last up, are blind shipments double brokered loads? And I know this one came in through YouTube. Just wanted to kind of clarify. No, they're not. A blind shipment is simply when the consignee, or I'm sorry, we'll just call it the shipper. We'll make this easy. The shipper is blind, aka it's not disclosed for the receiver to see. So let's say, for example, you're a company and you're buying goods from a supplier and you're going to drop ship them, meaning send them directly from the shipper to your customer as the receiver, but you don't want your receiver or your customer to know who you bought the goods from or where it's shipped from. You just arrange the transportation and you were the middle person there. It helps prevent back solicitation. So that's essentially what blind shipments are. You'll see it a lot in drop shipping. You have anything you want to add on that one? Do you ever do anything in the blind shipping world?
Yeah.
Did a lot in the LTL side for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's done. I did it a lot last year in the tanker side of things. So like customers would ship to their customers and they didn't want their customers to know where the product was picked up from. So sometimes we'd pick up from like the source, sometimes we'd pick up from their warehouse, but everything we did was blind so that they didn't know what was coming from where, right? They wanted
They
to be
just knew
able
what
to
they were
hide.
getting. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
So yeah, very common and see them more in some niches than in others, but they're all kind of usually for that same reason.
For sure. Well, good stuff. We appreciate the YouTube comments, even the haters out there that are telling us that we don't answer the question or that our video isn't about the title. Your engagement, nevertheless, is helping YouTube's algorithm. So continue to complain and consume our free content. We do appreciate the opportunity to educate you, and we get laughs by your comments. So continue to do all that. We appreciate it, and that's a wrap on the final mile. Ben, any final thoughts today?
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, go Bills.